Can Africa ever rise as one?
Not 54 fragmented states, but a single united force that speaks with one voice.
For decades, this dream has echoed, but remains painfully distant. When Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré, stood isolated, targeted, and nearly overthrown, where were Africa's leaders?
Most were silent. But one unexpected voice rose above the silence. Not a president, a king. The King of Morocco.
A representation of diplomacy, legacy, and now Pan-African unity. The Moroccan king took a different route while others remained mute.
He didn't merely provide words of encouragement. He sent a message of solidarity. Furthermore, he presented a gift.
And what he did sent shock waves across the continent.
An uncommon and potent move that has the potential to alter the direction of the AES partnership. The king provided access to Morocco's Atlantic ports, economic channels, and military cooperation at a time when Western powers and even other African nations are shunning Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger.
A game-changing strategic move.
This goes beyond politics. It's a spark, a moment that serves as a reminder that we may still be united, that another African country can reach out while the first one is standing alone. Perhaps we don't need to wait for the far future. Perhaps the few who choose bravery over silence and fraternity over boundaries are already sowing the seeds of a unified Africa. Perhaps one of those seeds was recently sown by the King of Morocco. Africa as a whole. When, not if, is the question. Many African neighbors have chosen to ignore Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger as they struggle to regain their sovereignty and recover from years of insecurity. Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and the former Ghanaian government are examples of Western African nations that have provided little to no assistance. Even worse, some have deliberately harmed these Sahelian countries. They have sided with foreign forces rather than offering solidarity, which has made it more difficult for the Alliance of Sahel States, or AES, to fight insecurity and regain control of their regions.
Benin and Ivory Coast are now prime examples of this treachery.
These nations have opened their borders to France, enabling the AES to set up operation centers with the goal of destabilizing the area while it strives for independence from foreign domination.
This isn't conjecture.
Many people think that these foreign-backed attempts, which were supported from across the Ivorian border, were directly responsible for the failed coup attempt in Burkina Faso on April 16. Africa's fault lines extend beyond its borders in this developing global impasse.
They are about loyalty to colonial ghosts or to a future based on self-determination.
In a region where tensions are on the rise and isolation is increasing, one nation in North Africa has taken significant action, not just platitudes. Morocco has taken a different tack as Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger deal with pressure from outside forces and treachery from their close neighbors. The kingdom's support for the beleaguered Sahel countries went beyond mere symbolism.
It provided something far more worthwhile. Sea access has always been crucial for the survival of landlocked nations like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso.
And for many years, the ports of Senegal, Benin, and Ivory Coast provided that access.
However, such avenues have become untrustworthy, if not hostile, in recent years. Benin's seizure of Niger's oil exports in its ports just last year revealed the brittleness of regional cooperation.
King Mohammed VI of Morocco has now taken a daring and unusual step by allowing the Alliance of Sahel States to access his nation's Atlantic ports. The declaration was made at a high-level meeting with the foreign ministers of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger in Rabat. The discussion was characterized by genuine fraternity as well as diplomatic gravitas. Morocco has provided the AES with access to international markets with this one act, avoiding countries that have abandoned them. It is impossible to exaggerate the importance. These landlocked countries now have a friendly and direct trading channel to the rest of the globe for the first time in modern history. Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré, the foreign minister of Burkina Faso, said the incident reflected King Mohammed's love for Africa and Africans. Morocco's gift is a potent reminder that unity is still achievable and that Africa's future depends on their support of one another during a time of conflict. Morocco's message was profoundly human in addition to being logistical.
Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré, the foreign minister of Burkina Faso, was clearly impressed by King Mohammed VI's deep understanding of the current situation in the Sahel.
He talked about the king's sincere desire to establish relationships based on equality and solidarity rather than power or coercion.
He remarked, "It's very touching," referring to Morocco's willingness to provide unconditional support for the development objectives of Sahelian countries.
It was a moment that demonstrated the strength of genuine Pan-Africanism, not as a catchphrase, but as an active practice based on respect for one another. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one.
Let's proceed.
Abdoulaye Diop, the foreign minister of Mali, expressed his sincere appreciation for Morocco's unwavering support, calling it a royal pledge to African unification. According to him, the Atlantic port access is a game-changing move that has the potential to end the geographical isolation that has long impeded Sahelian development.
Diop's admiration for Morocco's position on political changes, however, was arguably the most notable.
Morocco has adopted a different strategy, one of discussion over directives, respect over meddling, while regional organizations like ECOWAS and neighboring nations continue to put pressure on the AES coalition for a speedy return to civilian administration. By doing this, Morocco has become not just a partner, but also a representation of how African diplomacy may be rethought without interference from outside forces. Centered on shared growth and rooted in sovereignty, many people are unaware that this Moroccan initiative took time to develop long before the recent political unrest and attempted coup attempts.
It was first announced in November 2023. This recent conference in Rabat was a reaffirmation of a pledge made by King Mohammed VI, not a new proposal.
The king at the time stated that Morocco was prepared to open its port, rail, and road systems to the Sahel countries, provided that the AES countries built the necessary local infrastructure to connect to Morocco's already existing communication and transportation systems. It was an ambitious strategy that called for long-term dedication, teamwork, and vision. This gesture's purpose has always been obvious. Both Moroccan and Malian authorities have emphasized that Morocco's government has continuously demonstrated that it has the Sahel in mind. In addition to giving AES nations access to ports, the king has taken important actions, including waiving customs taxes on their exports and canceling their debts, said Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita.
However, this raises an important query. Given that so many others have opted for either opposition or silence, why is Morocco taking these actions? The answer is found in a straightforward but crucial reality. Sahelian insecurity is not a regional issue. Violence and instability have swept through the region since Muammar Gaddafi's overthrow. Morocco is aware that this unrest has the potential to spread throughout the continent if it is not controlled. Furthermore, Morocco is taking action as a neighbor, partner, and fellow African country dedicated to stability and unity, in contrast to those who wait for outside forces to take action. How, one might wonder, might seaport access alleviate Sahelian insecurity?
It's a legitimate question, but it also highlights how poorly known the causes of this issue are. King Mohammed VI has a perspective that is very different from the prevailing Western narrative. According to Moroccan Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita, Morocco has chosen a different course, one that addresses the root cause rather than merely the symptoms. In contrast to the US, France, and a large portion of the international community, who have concentrated solely on military operations and counter-terrorism efforts, Morocco sees infrastructure, trade, and economic potential where others see guns and soldiers as the solution.
And there's no denying the logic. Why do terrorist organizations flourish in the Sahel?
Because they prey on the forgotten, on villages that are so destitute and abandoned that the prospect of food, cash, or even just survival is sufficient to entice people to join. These extremist organizations infiltrate damaged communities and give the weakest members of society false hope. Child soldiers are cultivated from children, some as young as 7.
Hatred is not innate in them. They are hungry from birth. However, what if those same towns had functioning roads, clinics, schools, and jobs? What if there was hope for families? Extremism wouldn't have a place to grow in that world. And the King of Morocco sees just this kind of future. A future in which progress serves as the Sahel's barrier against hopelessness as well as fear. Beyond geopolitics, history, and principle, Morocco's audacious ambition has a deeper motivation. Morocco and the Sahelian nations have a long history of supporting one another and standing together.
King Mohammed VI has always valued these relationships and fostered them with words and deeds. According to Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita, the present royal endeavor is not a singular gesture of kindness. The king has long made a personal commitment to support the Sahel countries during times of need.
This is the ideal representation of African togetherness. Cooperation, fraternity, and steadfast support, not rivalry or censure.
When one country falters, others ought to support it rather than abandon it.
The king's steadfast faith in the Sahel's promise is perhaps the most encouraging.
According to Bourita, the king sees possibilities where others see challenges. Africa is in dire need of this kind of thinking. King Mohammed sees a future of development, change, and shared wealth. In contrast to those leaders who see the area through the prism of crisis and instability, he opposes shortcuts and flimsy fixes.
He contends that the only viable course of action is to make genuine investments in development.
It stands in stark contrast to many African governments' silence, particularly with regard to the AES, because the military-led alliance of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso has demonstrated a greater commitment to African integration than most of the continent's so-called democracies. They have steadfastly maintained their sovereignty, resisted foreign domination, and dared to envision a united future, one created by Africans for Africans. A pivotal point in African geopolitics occurred in July 2023, when a coup broke out in Niger, and ECOWAS threatened military intervention. Under their own military command, Mali and Burkina Faso united to defend their neighbor in the Sahel. The fact that these three countries had not yet established a formal alliance at the time added to the impact of this act of solidarity. The inherent intricacies of their transitions were still being navigated by each leader. Nevertheless, they acted without hesitation in the face of a shared peril.
Their stance was unambiguous.
It would be deemed an act of war against all three if Niger were attacked.
That one statement served as the cornerstone for the current AES bloc solidarity.
A fraternity built in times of hardship rather than comfort. Over time, this sense of camaraderie has only become stronger. The governments of Niger and Burkina Faso reacted swiftly. After Ukraine surprisingly acknowledged working with terrorists to attack Malian soldiers, they immediately denounced the action in public and expelled Ukrainian ambassadors. Nevertheless, the Western countries said nothing as the world looked on. No condemnation, no responsibility, nothing but quiet.
The AES alliance's commitment was only reinforced by this obvious double standard.
The solidarity inside the AES is founded on mutual respect, a shared fight, and a refusal to be dictated to by outside forces, which stands in sharp contrast to the fractured and foreign influence leadership of ECOWAS. The AES has put sovereignty, security, and real African-led solutions first, while others just concentrate on applying pressure on these nations to revert to civilian control. Politics wasn't the only reason they opposed ECOWAS's military threats, particularly those plans supported by Nigerian President Tinubu. It stood for Africans' right to self-determination, dignity, and autonomy. Threats, however, were not enough for ECOWAS. It placed Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali under harsh economic sanctions. Sanctions that severely damaged their economies, which were already precarious. The impact was swift and devastating in Niger. Nigeria cut off trade and electricity, leaving hospitals without basic supplies, medicine, or electricity. The loss of hundreds of lives was due to policy, not war. ECOWAS defended democracy as justification for this. However, what do we say when the populace backs the very military regimes that ECOWAS is attempting to overthrow? If democracy is genuinely about the will of the people were not coerced into these coups. They were accepted and even celebrated in certain places. ECOWAS decided to mimic the Western response rather than comprehending this more complex situation. Isolate, punish, and exert pressure. The blatant hypocrisy is what makes this even more perplexing. Despite claiming to support democratic principles, the bloc turned a blind eye to the coup in Chad. It is obvious that the question is not only one of democracy but also of which governments support Western interests. Furthermore, the African Union has not demonstrated superior leadership. The AU was absent when Mali first experienced insecurity. It waited until it was too late to take action, failed to communicate with Malian authorities, and made no effort to identify the causes of the situation.
Mali was forced to summon French troops after being left on its own.
That initiative, however, did more harm than good. Years later, the region is more insecure, the bloodshed is worse, and the promises of foreign assistance have become tainted memories. Morocco's strategy, on the other hand, which provides access, solidarity, and support, stands out as a unique and welcome illustration of what true African unity may entail.
The reality is obvious.
Only through unity and integration will Africa's future, its prosperity, stability, and independence, be realized.
The founding fathers of Africa had this idea.
Not a continent of 54 fractured republics, each turning inward, but a powerful community of nations working hand in hand.
What if African nations united to combat the Sahelian insurgency by combining their military might, resources, and intelligence?
The result would differ significantly from what we observe now. Instead, the majority of nations keep quiet, either observing from afar or waiting for Western powers whose interests are rarely in line with those of the continent.
How can we assert that African problems require African answers, yet African states continue to tackle their difficulties alone?
Morocco's decision is therefore more than a simple diplomatic gesture.
It's a blueprint.
Morocco provided direction and assistance when others opted for seclusion or apathy.
Instead of merely expressing sympathy for the AES countries, the kingdom researched the matter, recognized the underlying problems, and decided to take action.
Morocco gave Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso access to its Atlantic ports. But it also gave them economic freedom, trading opportunities, and the possibility to become truly independent. These ports, which are now access points to international markets, have the ability to greatly lower trade costs and unleash economic potential that has been long stifled by neglect and location. Morocco's program is a unique illustration of what it really means to be your brother's keeper in a continent where solidarity is frequently only shown verbally.
Africa must move forward with this attitude of collaboration, action, and unity. Morocco deserves praise for this fantastic endeavor.
The vision of a new Africa, one that is strong, bold, and takes responsibility for defending its interests, as well as one that is influential in the concert of nations, would be realized as quickly as possible if more African nations offered assistance to one another and collaborated rather than working independently.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more informative videos about Africa's sovereignty, Black history, and global power dynamics.